This is Brainy Podcasts with Soraya Shaw and Tracy Filler, inspiring creativity and innovation through evidenced neuroscience.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 17th episode of Brainy Podcasts. We're looking today at the art of creativity, and is it Gen AI or is it human? What is it? So today we're delighted to have with us Adam Hill, who's the founder and executive creative director, I guess, of a wonderful agency in Brighton called Designate. And actually, it's probably one of the few agencies that's still independent after 32 years. And we're going to be exploring with Adam today the importance of creativity, innovation, and critical thinking, from the advantage of hearing it from the mouth of a true creative who's got a unique brain and sees the world through a lens that I would actually love to be able to see the world through. So get ready to be inspired and get some real insights from Adam. And as you all know, when you listen to us, our driving mission is, it's not just, it's wonderful if you can be a pure creative, because we've met a lot of those, and the way that they think is really quite unique. But it really is about businesses and people learning to innovate, be creative, because otherwise, you either adapt or you're going to die. Businesses have to keep growing and have to keep developing. And we have to keep our humanness in the world of AI that's growing around us. But also we have a collaboration and a relationship. So I guess the first question for Adam is really, how do you define creativity?
I don't think you can define creativity. Let's be honest about it. I think during lockdown, I had a podcast thing about music, and I spoke to someone who was a musician from 07. He said that everyone's creative. And I have to admit, I agree with him. I think we are all creative. It's whether
we do too.
Yeah, good. Well, that's great. We're on the same foot. I think the question is how some people just don't use it. They put it away, they box it away. I think there's so many different types of creativity. I've always been very interested in something that I call hyper-awareness, which I think you'll probably know a lot about. To me, if you allow access to some form of hyper-awareness, I think that's where creativity can really, really be a wonderful place. And that is possibly, for me, where my lens is a bit different. I always feel like I know what's happening.
Is that because you sense things, you smell things, the whole intuition piece?
Don't put me on the wrong table in a restaurant, it'll ruin my meal. I'm one of those. I need to sit where I want to sit, which I also don't believe in. Why do you tell me where to sit? Don't tell me where to sit. Can I choose where to sit, please? That's the start to me of perhaps creativity, is allowing me to sit where I'm more comfortable. And understanding that, by the way, let's understand how other people's brains work and not understand how everyone's brain works. Let's understand how different brains are different. And I think that's important.
Yeah. In our first series, we introduced ideation as well, because that's how some people do find their access to their creativity. So, for example, I wouldn't say that I'm brilliant at coming up with something fresh and new, but I'm quite good at connecting things and building on that and sort of ideating a different use for something or building on something that somebody has said. So I work really well with a room of developing an idea rather than coming up with it in the first place. But that in its own right is creativity.
But except you're already sort of boxing yourself slightly by saying I'm better at this bit rather than starting from the zero. And for me, also creativity is a lot about not having a view. If you can, is there such thing as zeroizing yourself? I've just invented it if there isn't.
Zeroizing yourself. Tell us about zeroizing yourself.
Don't go in with preconceived thoughts or ideas. Don't think that hip hop is rubbish, or don't say that graffiti is wrong, or don't just go in and understand it exists and then start from that level. Look at everything around you and take it as a zero start point or an even start point. So to try and not be biased. And I've had so many crap brainstorms in life where there's some biased people in the room who try and start it by saying, oh, I don't know why people take protein powder, it's nonsense, or all vegans are rubbish. You can't start a creative debate with...
No, you can't shut it down.
No, exactly that.
Yeah.
So
what you're talking about there is that global belief stuff that just gets in the way and causes that unconscious bias that seems to be quite a big topic as well.
I think you're right. And I think maybe we should all come back to being like babies and be born with no preconceived bias. You know, I mean, that would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it were lovely. But I think that's what we always talk about. The importance for me with creativity, as you know, having been in the creative industries, is this whole thing around curiosity, which gets rid of your bias. You know, as you say, walking into a room and sensing it and being intuitive, you know, the thing just being curious about what's actually going on, who's here, what's happening, how does that work? How can we do this? How can we change this? That for me is the real driver behind creativity and imagination, of course.
Theoretically, we should all have imagination, shouldn't we? But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we had a client. It was fantastic. He used to go to a restaurant, sometimes order a dessert first, just to see what the reaction was of the person serving. And to me, that's great. It's slightly provocative, but creativity also, we have to be comfortable to talk about the shit that we don't feel comfortable talking about. And if we're not uncomfortable in a space, I don't think we can get creative.
You've really got to open your brain up because there's three main networks in the brain that are linked to creativity. One is the prefrontal cortex. The other one is the default mode network, which is when we're just daydreaming, which is why you get all your ideas in the shower and in the well, wherever we are. And the third one is the salient network, is where the brain is the saliency that the brain is drawn to. And these three networks work together to create this wonderful, whatever we think creativity is.
To sort of have those three zones, but to be able to start with a zero base, with that enthusiasm to look out, you know, and see what's going on around you, and start to think about the different things and reasons why has it happened, why does it exist, why are we in this situation now? Great subject matter, isn't it, of Trump at the moment? But why is he there? You know, how's he got there? What's created this? Am I allowed to say madness? Yes, I am.
Yeah.
What was the madness of him being back in there again? You know, but so we have to look back at so many factors. But I don't think I'd get to the same space if I read 5,000 articles about why Trump is now in office in America. I'd much rather do it visually, if that makes sense, rather than reading everyone's different views. And we have a purpose for that. That's what people who write are for, isn't it? Which is also creative.
Don't you think one thing that in our very first series, we had a great guy called Ian who joined us, and we were talking about how much, when you were talking about just that free and coming from zero, children have that wonderful ability not to have any of these biases, not to have read 1,000 articles, not to be judged by what other people have said or their peers think. They've got this wonderful innocence, and somehow that innocence gets taken out of people and told you can't be creative, which is why I think so many people are scared of creativity. Because they've forgotten how to do it. And I know that you were talking about, you feel very strongly about, for the future of creativity, the talent and how we bring young talent in, which is Tracy and I feel very strongly about being taught critical thinking and ideation and imagination. So how do you think we're going to develop that, especially now that we've got AI coming in as well?
I believe that Chris Bryant, who's MP for Media, Tourism and Creative, is ready and making change. So I do think that the previous government wanted to basically have a country who produced robots. I think they were only focusing on certain elements, being tech, science, and maths and engineering, I think. And he was dropped in schools, which is a bloody outrage, actually. I think it says in an intro, isn't it, for you? 1 in 14 work in the creative industry.
Yeah.
I think it's one of our biggest exports. One of our biggest reasons to exist as business.
Yeah, it's worth, for the UK, it's actually worth 44 billion. It's the second largest exporter.
Exactly. So let's celebrate it. We don't celebrate it enough. We don't look at it enough. And I think quite often it's because people can't see that it's not physical or it's not an object. But I mean, what percentage of the UK is service industry anyway? It's most of the UK business, which is always, harboring around politics a bit, but what the hell we did Brexit for, and we don't really have anything to sell, to me is still being amazing as in physical product. We should be supporting it. And Chris Bryant has said that he wants to make the schools, instead of STEM, he now calls it STEAM. He wants to put the A into STEM, which I thought was great. So science, tech, engineering, and maths will become science, tech, engineering, art, and maths, which is a hope for all of us, really. You don't have to get into creative, whatever creative is. I think it will exist in its own right and continue to. And the reason for that is it's human. it has feeling and it has emotion. And that's something we can talk about with the difference with the subject matter of today, which is AI, which doesn't have emotion. And what sells? Emotion sells. I can't imagine a 3-hour AI generated film, I'll be honest with you. But we still like a bit of someone being drunk, someone getting married, someone falling in love, someone falling out of love. I can't picture what the AI version of that film is. Emotion sells. We know that with advertising. We need emotion, and whether that's love or sadness or whatever that, or joy of. I mean, look, AI can't taste things, and AI can't get drunk, can it?
No. And it can't tell stories either, which is one of the arts that you bring to it.
That's interesting, because I've got a new mate called Claude.ai, and can tell stories. And I've had quite an interesting time with Claude, but we might come on to that in a bit. I put Claude to the test.
And what happened? You have to tell us now.
Because I have to tell you now. Well, the first starting point for me is that we're forgetting one thing about AI. It's got the word artificial in it, isn't it? It's artificial intelligence, right? Why are we not going, ha, ha, ha? Who came up with the name AI? Because I bet you regret it now, because now you're always going to have this word artificial. It's artificial intelligence. To me, when we talk about brands, although Carphone Warehouse made it through, they came up with Carphone Warehouse, and then people invented the mobile phone, and Carphone Warehouse were like, shit. We're not mobile phone warehouse, we're car phone warehouse. Now we look quite out of date. So AI does have the word artificial. Last night, I thought I'm going to ask my mate, Claude, to look at some artificial things. And I asked Claude to compare what's the difference, or what's the similarities, not difference, what's the similarities between AI and a vibrator? Because I thought about artificial things. I also had artificial Christmas tree, but I think you two and your listeners are probably grown up enough to cope with.
I think so. Yep.
Comparing AI with.
We're all on bated breath now.
So I asked Claude. Claude is the more creative writer. Claude can write in your style as well. So this is an interesting comparison that touches on how we interact with technology. Let me explore the analogy. Similarities between AI and vibrators. Both are technologies designed to serve specific human needs. Both can be personalized, customized to individual preferences. Both involve human technology. There's a word there, isn't there? Human. Interaction that can become routine or habitual, which I love. Both raise questions about dependency in human relationships. Both have evolved significantly over time with technological advantages. Key differences: purpose and function. Vibrators serve a specific physical function, while AI systems, like me, are designed for information processing, conversation, and problem solving. Complexity. Modern AI systems involve incredibly complex algorithms and massive data sets, whereas vibrators are relatively straightforward mechanical electronic devices. Adaptability. AI can learn, adjust responses, and handle a wide range of tasks, while vibrators have a narrower range of functionality. To me, that it does talk about human, right, and the human interaction and the human difference. So it allows me, I won't give it all, but if there's a link that you want to post with this, I can send you the text, because then I asked it, are you saying that you also need the real thing?
What makes me laugh about that, listening to it, is actually AI is slightly getting competitive.
Yeah, no, it is.
It's unbelievable.
In our last episode with Ross Stevenson, who we were lucky enough to have back and update on AI with him, he talked about the fact that AI is human powered. And I think that came through in that instruction, because it's kind of, how are you using it? How are you driving the use of both of those? So that for me came back quite strongly.
I'll just quickly say that the value I provide, this is an answer about, are you saying that you also need the real thing? And Claude said, the value I provide isn't really comparable to or in competition with human relationships. I serve different functions than human companions, just as tools in general complement rather than replace human capabilities and connections.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah. So that's probably something that leads you where my brain comes from. People laugh at me sometimes because I refer to my brain as if it doesn't exist in my head. It's like a separate entity. But I did it on Christmas trees. I can put them, because I grew up in a house with a purple Christmas tree.
You grew up in a house with a purple Christmas tree?
Fake, yeah, like a fake Christmas tree. It was purple, yeah.
Do you think that's where that kind of set your imagination off?
No, I think that my mother probably got it in the sale.
Because Because I like the way you describe your brain about being a separate thing, because it's that crossover between the brain and the mind. When you talk about your brain and your mind, is that you, or is that feels weird sometimes to talk about your brain as though it's part of you, where of course it is.
I always refer to it as my brain and how my brain is thinking. And yeah, some people find it quite entertaining.
Yeah.
But I do. It is. I mean, it's a friend of mine, but it's bonkers at times, I think.
Hence, you're having a very solid career with your own agency. I'm quite interested with going back to what you were saying earlier about people arriving and starting conversations at zero, which I love. And I think that's a really helpful steer for a mindset to go into any kind of meeting, brainstorming or otherwise. How do you harness that? When you're leading, you've got a brief in place with a client. How do you harness that amongst your team so that you're not narrowing that freedom to think, but equally you're working to a brief, right? You've got to get stuff done.
We are, and I think we recognise different people's abilities, but if it's going sort of into creative and just creative, for me, that's really important. The first thing is we will probably know who the right characters are for the type of job we're looking at doing, perhaps, but we might offer it out to everybody. And if it's something that someone isn't comfortable with, we'll say to them, you don't come into this room. We've created what we would refer to, I know there's a lot of talk about safe space, but a physical space where you have to be willing to hear some things that you might not want to hear so that we can debate. You can swear. We might introduce booze at some point. You might, but I think it's really important to look at everything, but also it's important not to only look at that brief from that client, because I think we have to look at all the things around it. So we would look at other markets and other places and other experiences and what's going on. Quite often we'll end up talking about world events while we're trying to look at a meat alternative product, which is another thing that's a bit like AI, by the way.
What is?
Vegan chicken.
I can't even imagine it.
Because it's a substitute, isn't it? It's a sort of, it's not just for vegans. I think I've always been amazed by, we're not going to call it fake meat substitutes, because they're not for vegans. They're for people. It's trying to say, try something different. You don't have to eat meat every day. Let's move you on a journey that will make a difference to the world and the planet. Let's eat less animals, but let's eat some meat substitutes so that, it's meat succession, they call it in the market. And I think I know where I'm going with this, but that to me is a bit like AI, that AI can help us get somewhere, can add to something. It's not the end result. It's not so fake chicken or vegan chicken isn't, you don't have to eat it every day. You don't have to give up meat, but it'll help you to it helps so many things around you.
What I'm hearing is connections and connectivity, because you don't just look at anything in isolation. You look at how it's connected to a wider picture. And that's where creativity goes. And actually, that's how the brain works as well. It's always trying to make connections. And so the wider your sphere and the less restriction you're putting on it, the greater material and content you're going to pull from.
And there you are, Tracy. And that is why I think AI is good.
Yeah.
All right?
To give us that broader picture.
Yeah, it's giving us a big starting point to go even more creative, in my view, not to take over from creative. I think
that's a nice way to look at it.
Well, it is making the connections, isn't it? So I can make faster, more interesting connections that I might not be able to do, and then take a base that's a better base. And there's things that will pop out that I might never have thought from there. So that's why I like AI, and that's why I like my new friend Claude.
I think it's really interesting. This is actually a theme that's, as we started this series, it was 16 months ago since we started. And all of a sudden, the past few episodes that we've done have been very much about this connection, this widening, this. So when we were talking about critical thinking, it's you can ask Claude or ChatGPT or whoever it is, and it can go much, much deeper and then give you that information for you then to be able to critically think about it or get ideas from, or, make the connections, all those things, that richness that it actually can give us.
Well, Sarah, I think what's happened is it's actually removed the dark art of the internet that was there, the bit that those of us who aren't geeks didn't really want to lift the bonnet up and think about. So now, to me, AI has become like Google Maps. I can get somewhere, it'll work it out for me. I don't have to think too hard. And then when I get there, I can probably spend more time enjoying the place I've got to, or so, I mean, yes, I'd love to use an old-fashioned map, or I'd like to get lost, which I still do, and people just still attempt to get lost quite a lot as well. But that's that Google Maps thing to me is very similar, so I can just use that. I can get to the destination. I can go choose different routes to get there, and then I'm there. But that's so. Let's not be afraid of AI. I genuinely think it's now at our fingertips for us to use, whereas some of us might have avoided such deep journeys into the internet, which I don't like, and I do think that's a different story indeed.
I think I really like your analogy of Google Maps, because I hadn't really thought about it that way before. But it is about helping you on a journey, and once you've got there, it's what you just do with that destination, then what you create from it, how you live it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how I think we should view it. I think that's how we should use it. And at the end of it, if Google Maps got me into a bar that was full of robots, I wouldn't stay in the bar, would I? So I'd walk away from that bar and find a bar full of humans still. So, and that's it. At the end of it, we've still got human interaction. We'll always have that. Well, I mean, Elon's making us 30% robots, apparently. They're going to be coming around, but, I'm not going to go out with a robot.
No, not my kind of friend, I don't think. Apart from if it does the housework and all the boring stuff.
Fine. Yeah, great.
That's fine.
Which is kind of what AIs do.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what AI is doing to the creative industry, because we are on a sort of a more serious note. We are seeing quite a lot of reduction in teams. The whole wider media and marketing space, the whole of the creative industry is having an impact on jobs going right now. What do you see as the future picture and the things that are still going to attract the next generation into creative roles?
Anything new and shiny, we always have a bit of a time when everyone just wangs on about that and they can't talk about anything else. And there's always a bit of disruption, but we love disruption in the creative industries. We love a bit of challenge. It wouldn't be bloody creative. Do you know what? I think, firstly, it's showing how little creative is valued because of the campaign that was put out, that was about fair play. I think it was stop trying to raid the creative, give some value to creative AI, because it's got to scrape creative to be creative. It's got to use our creative ideas to be creative. I think it's showing, without people realizing it, it's actually opening the debate of how important creativity is, because there's no AI without creativity, let's be honest. Going to try and make us an AI song, most of which are bloody dreadful. It's going to use bits of other people's songs. If you're going to write something, it's using other people's words. And if you want to do some AI art, it's using other people's art. So it's proving the debate that how important creativity is. And as someone who's run an agency for 33 years and watched people go, yeah, thanks very much for that, it's really good, but I've noticed it's got a similarity to a different logo in somewhere in Uzbekistan. You're like, shit, the internet isn't the answer to creativity either. It never has been.
Yeah.
We need to be embracing what's happening and talking about it. I mean, there was a lovely quote from someone I heard saying, it's not AI that will make you lose your job. It's the person who's better at AI than you who will lose your job. Now, there's
beautifully said. Yeah, beautifully said.
To me, it's been there, isn't it? That's what Google has been for years. To me, complaining about AI is a bit like sitting on your sofa for three years and eating Wotsits and dairy milk and watching telly and then getting up saying you don't feel very fit.
I think it's more than Google. Google's just a kind of like question and answer. Whereas what you've got with AI is, as we were talking about before, you can get a depth to it that you can't get with Google.
But this is just what I'm saying. It's just an advancement. We've fed it. We've created this thing. Now we need to live with it. That's probably what I was referring to Trump. They've fed him and they've allowed him. We've done this because we've given all the information. It's just that where I'm coming from, how I view it, is that we've made it much easier to use. So yes, it's eventually, if we'd thought about it, of course they're going to match everything up. The next scary thing is I don't wear wearable tech anymore because we've taught the computers how the human body works, haven't we? But it's us feeding it. I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent again. You must have to let me stop if I do. But so you're absolutely right, Soraya. It is but it's more usable, isn't it? It's what I think was existing before, but in a much more user-friendly format.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's why I'm not.
No, but it's interesting though, isn't it? Because you've got all this wonderful knowledge and experience under your belt. You're hugely creative, interesting man. How do we educate the younger generations to be able to have that debate? Because Tracy and I, in Europe, they've got something called
It's worldwide. It's PISA
Well,
22.
how do we get this debate going with, we were talking just before we started recording about everyone being on their headphones now. How do we engage people with this debate and to be able to say, well, actually, creativity is at the core of all that we do, and it's everything that we develop and how we grow and how we will evolve as a species, really. But getting people not to be lazy, getting them to share this debate.
So I don't. Yeah, I mean, it has to start with the schools, doesn't it? It has to start with the government. It has to start with us recognizing the value of creativity, and it has to start with people realizing how broad creativity is. Because again, I will go on tangents all the time, but if we do, and I have nothing against people who have food boxes delivered with a menu. Okay, let's say it's a brand called Gusto, right? Nothing wrong with that, but it's removing another element of creativity for you, isn't it? You're not going to the shop anymore. You're not going to go and talk to the local shopkeeper. You've got a box that arrives on your doorstep. You open it up and it says, throw some spring onions into a pan, add some oil, do some soy sauce. There's some shrimps in there and there's some noodles. We provided it all for you. Woohoo, you've got a Chinese meal. It's like, that's where you've taken a lot of the joy away.
Cool.
So
I'm going to challenge that one a little bit because my son started with his Gusto box, and there's something we haven't mentioned yet, and that's confidence. It gave him the confidence to get started. He knew he had everything he needed to make that meal, and he had very, very step-by-step guidelines to know that it's going to be really hard for him to screw it up. And that led him to become a bit more creative and a little bit more confident in having a go. And if there's a bit of an ingredients in something he'd seen that he didn't have in the cupboard, he'd replace it with something because he had the confidence. So we haven't talked about how confidence can influence how we develop our brain and our thinking as well.
And it also might be clever marketing, mightn't it? Which is what we do, which is to say, you can have the confidence to be like a restaurateur, your own restaurant, ready meals, But of course, and that is very similar to what AI can give you, isn't it? The confidence to go into a meeting pre-prepared with something to get you somewhere quicker. And again, it's another thing I would compare is these Gusto boxes to AI. It gets us somewhere quicker. I totally agree, by the way, confidence. If you go and do something, always you don't have to get out of your comfort zone, do you? But you're right. So that's allowed your son to cook in his own home and be confident about it. That's a lovely thing. And that does work from that point of view. Will he move out of Gusto? Let's hope so. Let's hope he goes to the local shop.
He has, yeah. Because he knows it's cheaper to go and buy the ingredients and come up with his own ideas with other people's recipes and things that he just pops together that he knows he likes the flavour of. But he couldn't have relied on that in the first place without that stepstone there. And maybe that is another analogy, although I absolutely love the metaphor of the Google Maps. I think that's just I've never seen it that way, but it's another way of looking at it, isn't it? Is it part of that building blocks that ultimately gets us to a better place than if we didn't have that conversation with Claude or chat?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the Gusto business model, but I think you're absolutely right. I think the creative barrier is being embarrassed, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't know what causes that. I mean, is that something in the brain that says you might make a fool of yourself? Don't do it.
People, you're totally right. And it goes back to what Tracy, everything we're saying really, is that actually because the brain is always scanning for danger, the worst thing that could happen to you is that you're embarrassed and you don't belong part of the team. You're not part of that tribe. You're kind of thrown out of it. And so it's fear. Fear is a huge barrier to most things.
Should be one of the most exciting spaces to be, is sort of to be uncomfortable. Do you not think, or not?
I mean, yeah, but it depends. I think this comes again to your upbringing and your personality. Like my husband always accuses me of being a bit of a show off by doing these podcasts, and he thinks that's great, but he was a film editor, so he's a quiet, introverted, and I don't like introvert and extrovert. I don't agree with it. But his nature is very much to put it all together and make it happen. My nature is to go out there and make a bit of noise, really. So I don't worry about it. So I think it's how you're brought up, the environment you're brought up in, the people you mix with, the examples, that's how the brain is wired. That's how it understands itself.
So is imposter syndrome real, or is that something that's been
That's biases. I mean, it's a great business thing to talk about, but actually, I did something recently for a barrister's chambers, and it was actually about bias. It's not about being an imposter.
Sorry, I've taken you off track again, haven't I?
Yeah, no.
Well,
look,
I
you've
just
done
wanted to
well,
say, Adam, not everybody grew up with a purple Christmas tree.
exactly.
I think it's so closely connected with fear. It takes people in one direction or the other. So fear where it debilitates and it shuts you down. And then there's the fear that you get that excitement from it and that powerhouse of pushing through with that adrenaline rush. Yeah. So I think, clearly we know which camp you live in with your purple Christmas tree.
But I think discomfort is an important place. And we are, let's be honest, right? We are creating an over-comfortable world at times for younger generation, I think. I think maybe we're not allowed get rough and tumble, go and climb a tree and fall out of it and things like that. I think we need to get back to that world, stop. And I was going to say that there's one thing in creativity, I think we touched on it, maybe everyone is creative, I hope so. If you're told in school that your ideas are wrong or daft and you need to go and learn this way, I don't think you learn creativity. I think you build it and you build on it. And I think that's an important bit. And if we're not giving space for that, and you're not giving space for disagreement, by the way, which I hated the fact all my life since Facebook was invented, it only had a thumbs up like button. I was like, why isn't there a dislike button? Right? It's utter nonsense. So if everyone's only looking for approval, then we fucked up creativity.
But Adam, I wonder if for us it's easier because I come from a creative background as well. And one thing that Tracy and I talk about a lot is around brain health and getting people to really achieve their potential is about learning to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yeah. And that's something that takes confidence. That's something. It's a horrible feeling when you're in a meeting and everyone's going, "No, that's rubbish. What are you talking about?" You're going, "No, let's work this through." And that's where I think the greatest teams are, and the greatest leaders are, and the greatest, because unless you create that environment where people feel they can say no and disagree, then you're just going to get yes people.
We have a thing that we say is when our rough edges meet, sparks will begin to fly at Designate, right?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
I want a room where people will just disagree and clash and bring the egos out and bring the conversation, be comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, you leave, but don't stay in there trying to guide it into comfort.
Yeah.
And it's that friction that creates the fire.
Yeah.
Tracy and I said very, very early on in these podcasts that even making your breakfast takes creativity because you've got to think about what am I going to mix for this and what am I going to do? What am I going to wear? You have to be creative. So it comes back to people's meaning of creativity. And to some, I work with some really clever people who I can't do what they do. They do maths and stuff like that. And they'll go, "Well, I'm not creative." And I go, "Well, I hope you are, because you're genius with numbers. That's what you do."
Especially if they're your accountant saving you tax.
Exactly. But they don't see themselves as being creative. People it goes back to those boxes you were talking about. And I hate putting anyone in a box. It's one of my real bugbears. And it's about, people accepting that we're all creative just in different ways.
Or let's flip it and say, which is what I believe in, is that a lot of people are frightened of the creative people, therefore they shout a bit louder to shut that creative person down. And I think in my experience, that's what leads to the lack of confidence for people sometimes, is that you're just going to shout me down. And some of those people are people who have read 28 volumes of something about the client, whereas I deliberately don't read 28 volumes of something about a client, because that if I read too much for a client brief, for example, if I read too much of it, I haven't got that 0 point I started talking about.
Yeah.
I've got client bias coming in then.
Yeah.
We have worked on that to say to some people, you don't need to read shitloads of stuff. You can just go in. As long as there's you've got someone who knows it, they can guide us into this allowing this creative stuff to flow. So I think, Soraya, there's a lot of people who shut down. I'm trying to think of the word. They're not offended by it. They're threatened by
But that's that fear coming with a different behavior that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. And when you were describing a little while back about the environment, you talked about the stuff like might have alcohol and we might have this, and we allowed them to swear a lot. That's the behavior, but actually it's about energy that exists in the room. Is it safe for them to feel vulnerable? That's that word that comes out there. That sort of, it's the opposite of fear. If you feel safe enough to be vulnerable and go, you might not like my idea, but I'm going to shout it from the rooftops in this room anyway, because I feel safe that if it's wrong, you're not going to make me feel stupid. You're just going to take it as one of those things that's an idea.
I don't think you can have a wrong in creativity. That's what.
I think, but that's your true. I wonder how many people in business, perhaps they're not in a creative industry, they're a bit more disciplined and structured with what they're expecting as a response, for example. And that off the wall thing that might be the crazy idea that takes them into the next generation of business and stops them from dying and allows them to innovate is often never aired, because the environment that they're having those discussions in do not encourage people to be vulnerable.
Absolutely agree with you. I think that's really important. We have our positioning here is we trigger bigger thinking. And this came from going into too many boardrooms where you'd have CEO at the front, at the top. Why are they always at the top of the table? Why are they always there? Right? And then you'd have this ordered people down the left and people down the right, everyone with a spreadsheet. And we were watching this going, well, actually what they're doing is they're being led a question by the CEO. They have to answer that question. It's only looking inwardly at the business, or it's looking at the competitor set. And we came in and said, look, we're going to sit at the back of the room or in the same table somewhere, but we're not going to be commenting. We're just going to be watching about what you're missing. Right? Let's talk about it, because we all talk from spreadsheets. You go like, marketing, give me your results. Sales, give me your results. No one's actually gone, do you think there's anything out there that we haven't discussed? What's the bit we're not talking about? Because that's the bit that really inspires me. So if you go in and there's a murder scene and you look at it and you look at all the spilt bits, the dagger and the blood, do you look around other things? Are you looking for the other stuff? That's how I see it. And that's why I was looking for the stuff that you haven't thought about.
So I always say it's about, where's that elephant on the table?
Yeah.
Because no one talks about the elephant.
One of the questions we always ask is, what's your leadership secret?
It's being excited by not the norm, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So encouraging people to be free. And I can't use the word different, because the word different annoys me, because I'm not sure if something's different and what's it compared with. I've never understood that bit, and I don't know what that means mentally.
Well, that's like our view on neurodiversity, because that's one of the reasons why I absolutely fell in love with Soraya when I was in her program, because one of the first things she said is, we're all neurodiverse.
Yeah.
And I was like, I like her. I love that perception, because we're all unique, and we all have something slightly different to sprinkle over something.
Yeah, definitely. I have a joy of tougher things, but I don't want to, I'd be mortified if I offended anyone. I have offended people by mistake, but I have a joy of uncomfortable scenarios, which allows people to be free. Freedom, expression. I've had clients all my life who say, oh, you can tell he's the creative one by the way he dresses. I said, I don't get up in the morning and think, how does a creative dress? I'm dressing what I want to wear. So that's probably it. It's to be celebrating people for who they are.
Yeah.
Nice.
Allowing brains to be open and big.
Yeah.
Or
open and big.
And come together. So what do you want to leave our listeners thinking and getting insights about and ruminating over this as they reflect on it?
Don't let someone stamp on you, or don't let someone shut you down. If you feel like you've got that something to be creative, which we all do have, just don't be diverted by others. Don't be diverted by the ones who might actually be challenged by you or actually frightened of you. Just go and explore it and embrace it and do it. I think that to me is really important, and it manifests itself. It's interesting what you're saying about neurodiversity. The creativity manifests itself in different ways, doesn't it? I think open your eyes, go and have a look, take your headphones off,
Yeah.
walk to work in a different direction. It's all fairly standard stuff.
Be human and embrace everything that being human is, including the things that we get wrong.
I totally agree with you. And, failure is a wonderful thing, I think.
Oh, that's how you learn. That's how you grow. It's the only way. And I know that sounds cliche, but I know I love feedback. As I get older, I love feedback because I can go, oh, okay, I hadn't seen it that way, and I can change that, or I need to add to that, or whatever. It's a gift, I think. Well, it is a gift. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam.
Adam, thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I will send you the Christmas tree and vibrator.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Maybe one is found under the Christmas tree.
Ooh.
Okay.
Now my imagination's gone a bit wild there.
Yeah.
Oh dear. My husband always says there's a line and you always seem to find a way to cross it. That's my gift. We'll finish on that, shall we?
I think so. I think that's perfect.
Enjoyed this episode? Listen to more at brainycasts.com.